Hey folks, this is Samuel Huber. Samuel Huber from Huber Family Ventures on Instagram, Samuel Huber from YouTube, Samuel Huber from Facebook, and www.samuelhuber.net. I'm here with Nikki Hughes, all the way from London, England, who is a mother of two,
Free.
three kids, and she herself is on the spectrum. And it's actually refreshing for me because you're the first fellow autistic parent I've actually talked to. And here in America, I'm often looked at as this unicorn for having children. Like, I've had people come up to me and literally be like, "Oh, your parts work that you can reproduce." I'm like, "Yes, like any other human being." Uh, like somehow my autism blocked me from doing that. So, Nikki, let's start off with you telling the folks a bit about yourself.
Okay. So I'm autistic. I am Romani. I'm also disabled, and I have 3 children. 2 are on the spectrum as well.
What are their names?
So my eldest is called Malachi. My second child is called Jaden, and my youngest is called Nikolai.
Mm-hmm. And my son's name is Sky. So can you tell the folks a bit about your personal journey with autism? Like, what was it like growing up in England with autism?
So I wasn't actually diagnosed as a child. I got a diagnosis as an adult, and it was actually through my children being diagnosed that I discovered that I was autistic and went for a diagnosis myself. So I can't speak for somebody who is diagnosed as a child and has grown up. But for me, not knowing, it was really difficult because I didn't have any help and support in school and during education. So I stopped attending school, really. And even though I did leave school with qualifications, I know that I probably could have done a lot better than I actually did if I had been given the help and support that I needed while at school. And then as an adult, I really struggled throughout my adult life as well, with it, especially with executive dysfunction, and not really knowing what that is. So trying to manage a household and children when you have executive dysfunction is really difficult. Because it's not necessarily the children that come that cause the pressure. It's them going to school and those sort of parents evening homeworks, make sure you read to them. There's a lot of expectation that comes along with having children from society that the children don't actually put on you. It's society that put on you. So I found it very difficult to be a mother and to be an adult, have a job, and keep that job going. And I found that actually a lot of the time when I was in work, that I was vulnerable to manipulation, because we as autistics have a good work ethic. So I think that people in the workplace would use that against me, knowing that I would be the one who would turn up, that I would be the one that would be on time, I would be the one who fulfilled my work. So it was almost like there was a lot of pressure from other people to constantly pile on the workload. And they would know that I would be the one constantly would turn up. So there would people who, like colleagues of mine, would just decide that they were sick that day or not turn up because they knew that I would turn up. It was almost my reliability was used against me. So there was a lot of pressure in work because I would go maybe above and beyond what was expected of me. So growing up, it's been really difficult with all those issues. I'm very lucky I have a very supportive partner, who, even though I didn't know I was autistic, he's always been very supportive of me and is able to support me, and be able to understand and manage my needs, even though we didn't know what those needs were and didn't know it was autism. So I've been very lucky in the sense that I've had a very supportive partner throughout my life, but it hasn't been easy.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you for sharing such an honest response to that question. And it does sound like you went through a lot. That executive functioning is, folks, definitely is something very challenging for people like me and Nikki, because we're often our social anxiety pushes us to try to please other people, and like she was saying, do the work for them, and realizing that we have the power to say no. Like these are my job functions. I'm not going to go beyond that unless I feel the need to. But it sounds like you definitely sounds like you're a full-time mom now, which is a job in itself of 3 youngsters. Yep. Let's jump into that a bit. Like, what was it like becoming a mom? Let's say for the first time for an autistic woman. Like, what was the birthing experience? And oh, I'm a mother now. What was that like?
I would say that I've always said that my children have never been the issue. It's always like societal pressures that are very difficult to deal with. It's the actually dealing with like professionals. So you would have like midwives and health visitors who, especially a health visitor is somebody who makes sure that the child is looked after and their development and everything until they are 2 years old, and is somebody that you can go to in the medical field who would be able to get you in touch with services and stuff like that if you needed it. So it's dealing with the social element of them, and because they're a healthcare professional, especially here in the UK, we have the NHS, so that because it's state funded, they cannot be seen to be influential to certain companies and things like that. So for me, trying to read between the lines of somebody's advice was very difficult. I would take things very literally. It's one thing that while my son was going through his diagnosis process, the doctors were saying to me that he was very clear-cut autistic, that let's go forward as if he is autistic. Like, this was before he was diagnosed. They were like, yeah, he's clearly on the spectrum, and his needs need to be met, and we need to start these therapies, like speech and language therapy and OT therapy and stuff like that. And it was a matter of time. But then when we were sitting around in sort of more of a professional setting, that same then professional would be like, we don't know if he's on the spectrum, like we have to wait for the official diagnosis type thing. And so that kind of up and down was really confusing for me, because I was like, well, one minute you're saying he does, and then the next minute you're inferring that there is some doubt there. And then privately I would say to them, well, why did you say that? That's confusing to me. and they would be like, oh no, we have to say that, it's like we can't say it because he's not officially diagnosed yet. So things like that would confuse me because I'm a very literal thinker, so I wouldn't be able to read between the lines with professionals. And that included that as a parent, when somebody says, oh, you know, you have to read to your child for like 10 minutes a day, and you have to do this and do crafts, and they need to be outside for this long, and then you have to feed them like this. So people's opinions about parenthood I took literally, and I ended up having postnatal depression and being very exhausted trying to meet other people's expectations, when actually I needed to rely on my own instincts as a mother and rely on the messages that my son was giving me, whether he was happy or what he needed, rather than everybody else's opinions. So becoming a mother was actually really difficult for me at first, and then I was able to understand and manage that everybody else has an opinion about everything, and that it's okay, and I don't need to do everything that everybody says I should. But then they go into school, and then you've got the added pressure of then school going, they need to you know, parents evening, and they're like, you need to do this, you know, you need to read for 10 minutes, you need to do that, they need to do this, and like homework, and sometimes that sort of societal pressure around parenting, even now, can be quite difficult for me to handle, and can sometimes cause me to actually have like meltdowns and shutdowns, because I feel like I can't cope with society's notion of what I'm supposed to be doing as a parent. That's not to, I'm just realizing that maybe what I would say might be taken the wrong way. You know, my children aren't neglected or anything, if that makes sense. You know, like they're fed, like, you know. So I'm not saying that like those sort of societal expectations. I'm talking about like sitting there and writing them a little note in their packed lunches, and you know, making the sandwich look like a butterfly, and you know, make sure that they're doing this arts and crafts and stuff like that. You know, that I'm talking about those sort of societal pressures around parenting, more than obviously, you know, feeding, watering and clothing them, you know.
Survival. Yeah, and that's something I definitely experienced myself becoming a father, is that like this is what a father should be doing, rather than trusting my gut. That a lot of people on the spectrum were raised to focus on those social stereotypes, that you need to cut your kid's sandwich into a butterfly, and you realize that a lot of those things are not necessary. They're just like nice to haves. And like what you're saying, Nikki, like you're feeding your children, you're clothing them, you're making sure they feel loved, that they're happy, and those are the actual essential parts of being a parent, that they feel supported by you. But the big thing about people, especially we fixate on these stereotypes because, you know, we're very empathic people, that we pick up on everyone's, oh, you need to be doing this and that to help your children get ahead, rather than focusing on your children's strengths and nurturing their strengths. Because even though two of your children on the spectrum, I'm sure they have amazing strength in certain areas, and I'm guessing that's what you focus on, is what can my son do, and what can my other children do, rather than, oh, did their sandwich look like a butterfly or not today?
I mean, I found that like with me, I had a societal stereotype in my head, and I was forcing this onto my children. So a lot of the time my children didn't want a butterfly shaped sandwich but I was forcing them to have a butterfly shaped sandwich because that's the stereotype society told me, which makes a good mum, you know. So a lot of the time my children didn't want these things, you know, and didn't want to go every day to the playground and have this, you know, time outside, and, you know, didn't want this sort of stereotype expectation on them. They kind of wanted to do things them like on their own, and but I kind of, yeah, did force the stereotype onto them.
Mm-hmm. But it sounds like you are very much aware of what your children do and do want to do and don't want to do that. What you're actually doing by recognizing that is you're encouraging their independence. That if you're always trying to follow like these social norms, like you're just making them more a sheep rather than a leader. And that's great that you're able to recognize that in your children and you know, honor that, because often the stereotype is that children's feelings don't matter, but they do matter. And how can a child ever honor their feelings if no one else does? So how do you honor your children's feelings when they're like, Mom, I don't want to go to the park today?
A lot of the time it all depends, because managing everybody's feelings within the household can be very difficult. So for me, say my two youngest do want to go to the park and my eldest doesn't want to. He's at an age where he's okay to be at home. So I would then leave him at home so that he would still be having his alone time, his privacy, his space. And not forced to go to the park. Whereas, say with my middle child and my youngest, my middle one can't be left at home by himself, especially he has special needs himself. So what I tend to do is explain to them, like, okay, we're going to compromise today for your brother, and then tomorrow your brother can compromise for you, and that everybody has to compromise for each other. Like we have to understand and have empathy that, you know, not one person kind of rules in the house. You know, our house is very much a democracy, and that includes us as parents, me and my husband. So we would say, do we want to go to the park today? And if the majority of people didn't want to go to the park, then we don't go to the park. There's as a parent, I'm not authoritarian. So although to a point, with discipline and things like that, you know, I'm very much like, we have boundaries and there is discipline in place, but I don't force my children to do things that they don't want to do. So especially with my two children that are autistic as well, if they're don't want to go around somebody's house, or they don't want to go to the park, or they're just you know, they have sensory overload, and then they have needs, then those are respected. And also I find that, like, as a parent, both me and my husband do, that I don't see a lot of other parents do, is that we apologize to our children. So when we have, through anger or emotion or being stressed out or whatever, have behaved badly towards our children, when we have calmed down, we apologize and we go, you know, just like you, we're humans, we have moods, and we're tired and we're stressed out. So we apologize to our children. So in turn, when our children are upset and are in a mood and tired and maybe would talk to us and treat us in a bad way, they then in turn, on their own free will, come and apologize to us too, because we're showing them by example of how to behave, and that it's okay to be upset and had these feelings, but hurting somebody else and being mean to them and being horrible is not okay, and you should apologize. So and me and my husband tend to keep an open line of communication. So even when my children are doing something that I particularly don't like or is bad behavior, I don't do it in a sense of telling my children off. It's not like you shouldn't do that in the story. I'm the parent. Like, I explain to my children exactly why they shouldn't be doing something, and the consequences of what will happen if they do those things. And I like to then have a discussion. So if I saying to my children, you shouldn't behave like this and this is why, and they sort of look at me as if they sort of disagree with that, then I say, you clearly disagree. Why do you disagree? And we have this debate. And so therefore we have this debate, and we have this discussion, which gives them a deeper level of understanding of what the consequences are, what their behavior may, how their behavior is wrong, and how it affects other people. So that's sort of how I honor their feelings and how they are, is by so I do find in that sort of way that I don't have major problems, behavioral problems with my children. And a lot of people are quite surprised at the behavior of my children, especially those with special needs, because they don't have behavioral issues at all. And my sons hardly melt down, because there needs to be a met. So there's a lot of children who don't have special needs and are not on the spectrum, whose behavior is a whole lot worse than my children. So and I think it's because we generally have everybody's needs being met, including my as a parent, my needs come behind my children, like but my husband also understands that, like, because I'm autistic as well, I have sensory overload, and that I need to self-regulate and things like that. So he also gives me the space as a to be able to do those things, which make me a better parent. I'm able to be there for my children as well. So being on the spectrum as well, I'm able to understand when things are to see the signs within my own children and be able to say to them, you need to go self-regulate right now. Do you know what I mean? And even if we have a household of people, family members, friends around, you know, I will literally say, my son needs to go self-regulate, leave him alone, this is what he needs to do. And I don't care if anybody thinks that's rude, because in our home that's what happens, and that's what's the benefit for my children. So if you think it's rude, then just don't come, just don't be here. Don't be in our lives.
Nikki, I'll first thing I'm gonna say is I am in freaking all of your parenting skills. Like, bravo! Like, I almost want to cry right here, because just like your awareness of what you need as a parent, what your children need. You're doing all the right things of setting boundaries, and you understand the importance of answering that why question rather than just telling your children because I said so. Like I'm gonna probably rewatch this interview after we're done a few times to keep learning from you, because we had so many parenting nuggets of wisdom. Because I only have one child and he's 2. I'm still in the early things, but I'm just in total awe of you right now and your parenting skills, and how you and your partner really seem to treat your children as human beings rather than you need to obey me right now. You know, so I think when you're authoritative with your children, that makes them feel less and like they have less value. But it seems like you and your partner really, through your open communication, make them feel like they have value. And I think that's the biggest thing for children on the spectrum or off, is that they have value, that their opinions are heard, their feelings are heard, but you're setting these clear boundaries that I'm the parent. Because I think some parents make the mistake of, oh, I'm gonna be my child's friend, and but then they lose all authority. And then it seems like what you and your partner do is you keep your authority over your children through respect rather than by force. And that's really powerful. And I love that you give yourself and your son time to self-regulate, and the fact that you actually apologize to your children for your behavior, because like parents can be wrong and that's okay. And then you're teaching your children it's okay to be wrong sometimes. And then through you're both being living examples to your children that of how to be a good human being. And I think that's the biggest thing people, at least in America, miss about raising autistic children is we have to make them normal. No, let's make them human beings.
Yes.
Through examples and respect and trust and compromise and empathy. So again, like it's made me so happy to see someone else on the spectrum who is a parent who gets what our children need. My next question is, you talked a lot about your partner. How did you and your partner meet?
We've actually been together since we were 15. So we actually we both went to different schools. So I went to an all-girls school, he went to an all-boys school, and we actually just happened to meet randomly on the street one time and have spent every day with each other since.
Aww.
So we've actually been together 18 years.
Wow, that's a really long time. Is he on the spectrum too, or is he neurotypical?
He's neurotypical.
My wife's neurotypical. And so how did he propose?
So he actually, it's a really funny story actually, because he there was no big song or dance about it. He just sort of said to me, you know, I can't imagine my life without you. But I actually misheard him and thought he said with you. So I thought he was actually dumping me when he was actually proposing to me. So I thought we were actually splitting up, and he was like, I can't imagine being with you anymore. And he was actually saying, I can't imagine being without you. And we actually got engaged at 15. We didn't actually marry until we were in our I was 20 when I got married. And that was more for financial reasons, that we couldn't actually afford to get married at 18. So he actually proposed to me at 15, and in my engagement ring, it cost about £20 at the time. So a very inexpensive engagement ring. There was no restaurant or rose petals or anything like that. It was just very much like, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. And that's how we kind of got engaged. And at 15, I mean, I think we was actually going out 2 months when he actually proposed. It was very, very quick, and we just sort of knew that we were sort of made for each other, and that we were going to have this long life with each other, and this relationship. We just kind of clicked like that. So I'm not the sort of person who would have wanted a big display either. I think if we did do it in a different way, where we was at a restaurant or something like that, I get very socially anxious, and I hate people sort of staring and becoming the sort of center of attention. So for him to have made a big display, I probably would have been really angry with him rather than happy about it, because I'd be like, you kind of embarrassed me, you know. So it was, it was very laid back and relaxed, like pretty much our whole relationship has been, really.
That's definitely a beautiful story, and like I'm almost thinking like that's like perfect for like a good movie too. Like, because I also had a very simple proposal. Like my wife was, we were just sitting on the couch, and her head was in my lap, just staring at me. I just blurted it out because we had been only dating, also only 2 months. When I 2 to 3 months when I proposed to her, and she didn't think I was serious. And then I proposed to her again in the park, down one knee with the ring thing. But it's funny how like stuff like that happens. Like I totally get what you're saying. Like you clicked, and like you knew what you wanted, and that was beautiful. What was your wedding like?
So my wedding was, like, I suppose, relatively big. I think I had I think I had 5 or 6 bridesmaids. So it's relatively big. We got married in a church. We both had big families, so it was like we had quite a big church. And then we had quite a big reception. But if I think going back, I would have changed my wedding day, just because, again, I sort of went with everybody else's social expectations of what a wedding should be. Like, my main focus was actually the marriage, actually getting married, and having the vows. The only thing that I was really one thing that I was very, very focused on was my dress. I wanted to make sure that I was beautiful for my husband, but generally everything else just seemed like extras to it, that I wasn't really bothered about it. And everybody else was sort of like, well, what's the table arrangement, where are you gonna sit here, what's your cake like, what's this like? And I was just like, oh no, like, whatever. Like, it doesn't, I don't know, what's your color scheme, I don't know, like, why does it sort of it doesn't really matter. So, like, I remember a lot of people, especially my mom, was really frustrated with me because I just didn't seem to be stressed out about it all, and seemed to be very relaxed and not really worried. But definitely the expectations of sort of being the host of this and making sure everybody was fed and watered and happy, and that the music was okay, and the thing is like, again, it was like the reception, and I spent most of my reception trying to make sure everybody was happy or outside, because the social element and the music and all the conversation, the noise, it was so much that I needed to constantly take breaks outside to sort of regulate and deal with everything else that was going on. And thing is at the time, I smoked cigarettes, so that's a socially acceptable excuse to constantly be out of a building, because here in the UK we can't smoke inside public buildings and stuff like that. So you would have to go outside to smoke a cigarette. So it was almost like a socially acceptable excuse for me to constantly go, well, I need a cigarette, or I need a cigarette, I need a cigarette. So but really it was a way of me sort of being able to take sort of a breather. It feels to me as if like swimming underwater, and that sometimes you need to take that breath to be able to go back down into it. And that's what it kind of felt like to me, like I was just sort of swimming out through underwater, and sometimes coming up for a breath of air, but like I really just couldn't wait for it to end. And I know that sounds like really terrible, but because it's my wedding day, but what I wanted to focus on was, you know, the actual getting married, saying our vows, having that very intimate moment between the two of us, even though we were in front of a crowd of people. You know, I was able to focus on the fact that it was an intimate time between me and my husband, and everybody else sort of seemed to drown out in the ceremony. But the reception was very, very difficult, and I think if I could go back, I would definitely insist on it being more for me and my husband and how we kind of wanted things, and maybe to have it more in a relaxed sort of environment, like more of a like sensory happy environment.
Thank you. That it sounds like a beautiful wedding, but I totally get you. Thinking back to my own wedding, like I didn't smoke cigarettes, but I'm like my reception was held at my parents' house. So I like offered to walk the dog every time I felt underwater, as you described. I think that's a perfect analogy for how strenuous social situations that big can be for people like you and me. And like you said, it's really about you and your husband or your partner, however you want to refer to it. I think, like looking back, that's I think the key for anyone who's gay married or is in that kind of relationship to focus on. It's about you two. That the table arrangement doesn't matter because that's not what you're gonna remember at the end of the day. You're gonna remember how beautiful you looked in your dress and how handsome he looked in his suit. What it was like looking into his eyes as you exchange vows. Like those are the things that'll stay with you. But going forward, how do you and your husband communicate? Like, say he pisses you off. Like, how do you communicate? What's your husband's name?
Michael.
Michael, you a-hole. Like, you forgot to take out the garbage, or how do you communicate your feelings to each other?
Sometimes initially, if I'm really angry and I'm feeling like overwhelmed, it will come out as an outburst and we will argue, and then eventually we do sort of simmer down, and then we do end up speaking about the root of the issue. It all depends whether or not I have a meltdown, because when I have a meltdown, I don't really remember what I'm doing. I don't really have control. I just sort of like explode. So I have been known to like throw things and smash objects up and things like that and become really overwhelmed. And at that point, I tell him to leave me alone. That's generally what I tell him to do. Is like, I'm like, if I'm in a meltdown, I'm like, leave me alone, because if he continues to be around me, if I don't have space to sort of calm down and get out of that meltdown, and self-regulate, if he's still in that area and still sort of putting fuel to the fire, one of the things that I will do and not realize that I would do is lash out. So if he was to come near me, try and stop me from going anywhere, especially if he tried to grab me and touch me in any way, I would lash out. So generally, we've realized that, when it's got to that point, I need to be on my own and he needs to leave me alone until I'm out of that, out of the meltdown, out of the exhaustion period that comes after that as well. And then we're able to have a conversation. But generally, what we would do is sort of maybe have a little bit of bickering. So it'd be like, a little bit of shouting at each other, and then generally like calm down and talk in depth about what the issue is, how we're feeling. Because the one thing that me and my husband tend to do is we tend to go, I feel like you are doing this, because what sometimes we found that what we were doing is that a person would be like, you are doing this, and then the other person gets very defensive because they're like, no, I'm not doing that. So then it was like we changed our language to go, I feel like you are doing this, and this is making me feel this way. So then the other person wouldn't be get so defensive and be like, well, okay, that's not what I meant to do, and I'm sorry that you felt that way. Do you see what I mean? So that we sort of changed our language to understand that not necessarily that person was doing that, but our perspective was that they are doing that. So it's like, I feel like you are doing this. So it changed the language and stopped us being defensive with each other. The same way, like, I would take things literally. So sometimes my husband will want to just vent about a situation, and and what is upsetting him and stressing him out, and he would obviously be quite angry about with the certain situation. So I would get really defensive because I felt like he was sort of attacking me for it, that the situation, and expected me to do something. So the one thing that we really do with each other is, in that situation, I say to him, do you need me to fix it, or are you venting? So that it was perfectly clear that he was just venting, and that I had no expectation to actually try and fix something or come up to a solution, that I didn't have to be defensive and try and defend myself or anything like that, that it was just a case of like that he needed to release some steam and sort of vent about a certain situation, and that I didn't need to do anything about it. Because that was an issue in our relationship, that I felt like I constantly needed to fix things and was responsible for things. So it's when he was like angry, it was like, well, I'm sorry, I'll try this and I'll try that, and I'm trying my best, and I would get defensive, and sometimes people just want to vent. But I would definitely say that we try to communicate and talk about how we're actually feeling and what's going on a lot, because what I've seen from talking to other autistic people is that autistic people have a face when they're just like stimming or just relaxing, like it's a very straight face. And a lot of neurotypicals can't figure out our emotions when we have such a blanket face. So my husband used to like constantly say to me, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? Like constantly. And then it would really irritate me. So I would be like, I've told you I'm fine, and it would like build up like that. So I'm like, now I'm not okay because you're making me angry. So it's communicating and saying to that person, when you keep asking me over and over again, that it really irritates me, that makes me angry, and then I end up like shouting at you, I'm not okay, this is the reason why my face looks like that, I'm just chilling, I'm just relaxing. So sort of like, again, with the way that we do with the kids, we explain things in depth with each other, like how we actually feel and what our actual needs are, whether we can actually meet each other's needs, because sometimes there are things that I need that I know that my husband can't always give to me. There are times when I need his help and support, but we have 3 children, so he's not always available to give me that help and support. So he can, you know, that's what we do. We have a discussion. I say, well, I'm in need of this, and he's like, well, I can't meet your needs right now because I have this other responsibility or whatever. So we just constantly try and keep communication open as much as possible, and also to understand that we're both human beings, and that we all have emotions and we all have moods and we all can be tired. The same with the kids. So it's like when my husband is tired and he's overwhelmed and he's snappy at me and he can like shout at me and stuff like that, I just don't take it personally. I'm like, I understand he's tired, and I'm not going to take this personal because I know that this is a mood. So then I'm not adding fuel to the fire by getting so upset and angry back. That I kind of stay placid with him, and then obviously when he's out of that mood or whatever, then he'll come and apologize to me, and then vice versa. If I'm tired, if I'm in a mood, if I'm overwhelmed, he doesn't really take anything personal. So it's like, when, yeah, you're just sort of like becoming a bit of a pacifist. That's not to say that if my husband doesn't go too far at times and really does upset me, that in that moment I say, okay, now you've hurt me, you've upset me. And so we always make our feelings perfectly clear in that moment, say exactly how we feel in that moment, and don't let anything continue. Because I feel like if you don't speak in that moment, because with neurotypicals, a lot of the time they express one thing. So they'll express like they might be happy and everything else and go away, and you think that they're happy, and then you find out later on that actually you've hurt their feelings or whatever. So one thing that I say to him is like, I will not understand that, so you need to make things perfectly clear to me. If you are upset, you need to say you're upset. You know, I'm not going to read between the lines of you sort of sitting there and I go, okay, and you go, I'm fine. Do you know, I'm not really going to understand that. So you need to make it very clear in that moment how you feel, and it's actually been really beneficial for us because we're able to understand that there is a problem and there's an issue, and things don't build up and don't escalate, and you know, resentment doesn't sort of build up over time, because we're able to resolve issues as soon as they happen.
Wow, like again, I am in all of your communication skills. Like, it's something definitely like the way you're describing how you are with your husband. I'm definitely the same way with my neurotypical wife. I'm not as far along as you guys are in understanding that stuff, but there's just so many nuggets of wisdom for neurotypical couples or couples that have one spouse or both spouses on the spectrum. Like, they're just like, wow. But I think one of the big things that I try to help my clients understand, and maybe you can shed some light on this. Did you guys go into your marriage with all this communication knowledge, or did you have to work on it?
Yeah, we've had to work on it over the years. I mean, we got together when we was 15, so we have grown up with each other. So every stage of our own personal development and growth as people and becoming adults, we've done together and have constantly at every stage of our life sort of had to still reevaluate and still work and still say, you know, like, do we want to still be with this person, be in this relationship, you know? Because at every stage that you grow as a person, you got to still make sure this is the partner that you want, and the person you want to be with, and is the relationship fulfilling you. And at times for my husband, when, you know, the relationship wasn't necessarily meeting all his needs, and the same with mine, we've been able to be very honest with each other and talk about that, and talk about actually what we need for the other person, and generally learn. And it's because I think we went into the relationship with the mindset that there were certain boundaries that he had, and there were certain boundaries that I had, that was like, these are our lines in the sand. If you cross them, the relationship is over. So for me, it was like being cheated on, being hit, you know, those sort of things. I was made that very clear even at 15. I was like, these are the things that I will and will not accept. So for me, one of the things for me was arguing and being yelled at and in the street. So that was one of the things that even at 15, I was like, I do not, if we have an issue and we're arguing, like, no one needs to know that that's between me and you. All of our discussions are private between us. So no, you know, I'm not somebody else's entertainment, because the thing is when couples are having an argument in the street, or that people know what's going on in their relationship, it is drama and entertainment for some people, and some people actively try to stir up things within people's relationships to keep that sort of drama and entertainment going. So one of my biggest things was, I was like, that our relationship was our relationship, and no one knows what our issues are. And nobody knows when we're arguing. So we could be in a full-blown argument, and if someone knocks on the door, they can come and have a whole complete and utter visit at our house and have no idea that we was in the middle of an argument. Because I definitely wanted to keep things private in our relationship, because I feel like when you get other people from the outside involved in your relationship, especially those who don't have and feel the connection that you do with your partner, it can sometimes mean that they put their opinions in about your relationship, about your partner, into your head, and can affect how you feel. So it needs to be everybody else out, and just a solely communication between you and your partner, and keeping those, really talking about how you feel, your feelings. And we have just learned over 18 years of being with each other, and I'm not saying that we won't continue to learn as well. We'll continue to work on these things and continue to work on our communication, but generally putting boundaries in place from the very beginning of what you will and will not accept, and what are your deal breakers. And my husband knows those boundaries still are in place. If he was to cross any of those, no matter the fact that we have been together 18 years and that we have 3 children, that is a deal breaker for me. And this is the same with me with his, you know. So those boundaries need to be put in place from the very beginning of the relationship, so that everybody knows where they stand. And then I would say complete and utter honesty throughout, like keep talking and keep being honest, because a relationship can't work if there isn't honesty in how you are feeling, how what your needs are, and things like that. It need that communication, and that honesty needs to be there, because even I've suffered with mental health issues, with depression and anxiety. So there have been times in our relationship where I have been suicidal, and my husband has had to be able to have found to understand the behaviors that I was given out, to understand that actually in that moment that I needed help and support, and that I was suicidal, and that he needed to keep an eye on me and things like that, and to get me and encourage me to seek help from therapies and things like that. So a lot of the time it's like with my mental illness, that I have to be honest with him, what is in my mind, how I'm thinking, how I'm viewing reality that may not actually be what is real. So I might be projecting onto him, and I might be predicting how he thinks, or assuming how he's feeling, due to like my mental health and stuff like that, and that may not be how he's actually feeling. So keeping that line of communication open, and actually saying, like, I feel like you hate me right now, and him saying, I don't hate you, I love you. Do you know what I mean? And that's not how I feel, and I think that you're beautiful and you're wonderful. I mean, like, everybody wants to hear from their partners that they're still, especially after a long period of time, that they're still attractive to them, they're still beautiful, they're still in love with them. I feel like a lot of people in a relationship, especially after a long time, can get complacent in a relationship and forget to actually tell their partner that they're lovely, they're beautiful, they're handsome, they're intelligent, they're everything that they've ever wanted. So definitely to keep that line of communication, and understanding, like, yeah, I'm feeling tired, I'm feeling frustrated, I need support, I need affection, I need love, I need this.
Mm-hmm.
That has definitely always been something that we have tried to actively do, is be honest and communicate with each other.
Thank you, Nikki, for sharing that. And I love the bottom line is communication. And while my fellow Aspies out there, I know communication isn't easy for all of us. Like Nikki said, it's a process of constantly reevaluating your relationship with not only your partner, with your friends, with your children, and getting to that point of being honest and respecting your partner when they're ready to be honest. And wrapping up this interview, Nikki, I always like to ask my interviewees, if you could change one way the world sees autism, what would that be and why?
The one thing that I wish the world would see about autism is how diverse autism is. That it is a spectrum, so that everybody has everybody who's autistic has different autistic traits, and there's not one view of autism that fits everybody, and that just because you met one autistic person doesn't mean that you know autism. So just because one autistic person may struggle with a certain thing does not mean that every autistic person would struggle with that certain thing. And just because an autistic person may be able to have a trait that would be seen as like a genius, like a photographic memory or something like that, doesn't mean that every autistic person necessarily has that genius element as well. So to understand that autism is very diverse. There are different autism autistic people are of all different races, of all different cultures, of all different religions, you know, and different in every single way. So my autism isn't the same as your autism.
Beautiful, Nikki. And for a quick bonus question, what is your advice for any autistic women out there who just found out they're pregnant for the first time? Like, if you could go back to Nikki when you had your first child, like, what would your advice be to that woman?
I would say that as difficult as it may be very, very open and clear about what your needs are, especially sensory wise, because in the medical field, especially as a woman who is going to give birth, your autonomy to your own body comes second. So there will be a lot of medical professionals like midwives and stuff like that who will touch you without asking permission. So like for me, I get very sensory overloaded by people constantly touching me. So for me, if I could go back, I would say make it perfectly clear to always say to me, you're going to touch me, ask permission to touch me, and make me aware that you're going to touch me. Don't just touch me. You know, it's especially for me, I found as an autistic woman during childbirth. I mean, childbirth is very difficult anyway. You're in an extreme environment, and you're in an extreme amount of pain, and it can be a very anxious and scary time. Every woman experiences that. With autistic people, our sensory needs can go to another level. So things that we might be able to have tolerated before might be in this extreme circumstances intolerable. So make your needs perfectly clear to your midwife. Really think about a birthing plan and ask for those professionals to stick by that. So you are in charge of how you give birth. So for you, if you want to be at home in your own home environment and control that, that is your choice to do so. If you want to be in hospital, you know, ask them to you know, if the light is too much, you know, pull down blinds, things like that. You know, make it perfectly clear what your needs are. Because otherwise it will quickly be taken out of your control, and it could quite quickly make things 10 times worse for you. So if I could go back, there's definitely what I would do is be stronger with saying, this is what I need and this is how I want it to be, and I'm not going to deviate from that.
Thank you, Nikki, so much. And I think that was excellent wisdom for all the new mommies out there who are also on the spectrum. If someone wants to follow you or ask you more questions on parenting while being on the spectrum, how can they get in contact with you?
So I'm on Instagram as Autistic Life in Motion, and I have a Facebook page called Autistic Life in Motion. I'm on Twitter as Nikki Hughes 87, but I'm not on Twitter that much. I find Twitter overwhelming. So it's mainly Instagram and Facebook that I'm more Instagram that I'm contactable on.
All right, Nikki, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your life story with us and being so open and honest. That's the big message that I took away from all your nuggets of wisdom today, that Key to being a good parent and a good partner is being open and honest about what you need and feel with your partner and your children. We hope to have you again on Heroes of Autism, because I have a million more questions for you, but I'll tackle that another day. Thank you for coming on today and sharing your story. All right, folks, this has been another episode of Heroes of Autism with Samuel Huber. All right, I'm going to sign off. Bye, everybody.
Bye.